One of the things that I think about very often is how mindsets are formed, how we decide to come up with these patterns in our mind. Some of these addictive things that plague millennials, younger millennials, Generation Z, things like pornography, things like masturbation that have become pretty much the norm. This is some of the questions that I really would like to answer. And so today I have invited Mr. Bankole Williams. Psychotherapist. I missed a bunch of other many things that I can't remember right now. There's too much you do. Maybe you talk about that at some point. But yes, Bankole, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Looking nice. Life is treating you well.
Yes.
Yeah. Can give me some of that money too, perhaps. Think about it. Okay, fine. Anyways, so talking about the mind. That's one thing that you champion. You talk, build a career talking about the mind, talking about how we form mindsets, patterns of the mind, and things like that. So, first of all, let's start with addictive behaviors. And I use myself as a case study. So you're younger, you're in your teenage years, and I feel like it's almost a rite of passage now, the way that it's almost explained and received, where we have a lot of teenage people exploring their body, but society tells you that exploration is well, they say it's fun.
Yeah.
The church says that it's sinful.
Yeah.
So there's so many contradictions, and there's the one person in the center who's then just left confused. But even at that, even when you explore, how does that become addictive? How is that some people have explored and like, oh, okay, this is what's going on, and left it. And some people have explored and cannot stop exploring.
Yeah.
And in any case, what do you even say to that? Because in the first place, when you talk about honoring your body and things like that, and honoring your body as a temple of God, there's a school of thought that, things like masturbation and pornography and all that, they're sinful, not to condemn anybody, but it is just what it is. So, what would you say to a teenage child? Like that is kind of like, what's going on with me,
Well, I think first of all, it would be important to even, explain to people how these things start.
Okay.
Right. A lot of these things are housed or lodged in the experiences of our past.
Okay.
The three things that I believe determine people's mindsets. In fact, let me even start with what a mindset is. A mindset is a fixed disposition, mental disposition that predetermines a person's interpretations of events and ultimately their results.
Wow. Yeah, say it again.
I'll take it again. I'll take it slowly.
Slowly.
A mindset is a fixed mental disposition. So people's minds have taken certain forms.
Okay, fixed mental disposition. Yeah. Okay.
And people don't know. They're not even
They just don't realize it.
Exactly.
Okay.
That predetermines a person's interpretations of events. So there's a way they see these things, these habits or these behavioral patterns and stuff like that. So it predetermines their interpretations, but ultimately their outcomes. Right now, mindsets are formed as a result of a lot of the experiences that we've had, growing up.
Right.
Your upbringing, the environment you grew up in, and one critical one for me is significant defining experiences. Right, moments in somebody's life that really, really defines a person. So. Let's look at upbringing. So, for instance, if somebody grew up in a family where the parents were not always around, and maybe there was a house help or somebody who was always there and sexually molested a child. Now, children are very subconscious. So, nobody remembers the day they were born. Do you remember?
No.
Most people don't remember their first birthday.
True.
Right? So, you're not aware, you're not conscious of what's happening. Now, that's very dangerous stage in a child's life, right? It reminds me of the scripture that says, while men slept, the enemy came and sowed tears. So the devil is looking for those moments when we are not conscious. So sleeping is a state of unconsciousness. So he looks for those moments when we are not conscious of ourselves, right? And he wants to damage people's lives in those moments. So
before we gain consciousness
to be able to make decisions. So at that early age, you're exposed to that kind of lifestyle repeatedly over a period of time. Now, unconsciously, what we don't realize is that mental patterns are being formed, right? And there's a default way of behaving. So when you feel a certain way, which is what happens to a number of people, they feel a certain way and their brain is instructed to make a certain decision and act a certain way. So some people is when they feel, depressed, they feel that the next pathway to take is that pathway that they've been used to because of what depression means to them, as a result of the experiences of their past. So a lot of people have had these kinds of experiences, and that's one of the reasons. So I was really curious to find out, how do you solve problems like this? I've heard people, and I believe in prayer, I've heard people pray about things like this and they still struggle. I've heard people go for different kinds of counseling classes and things like that and they still struggle. I've always been curious, what is that essential thing that you can introduce that can help people fix things like this? And one of the things I've discovered is that it's actually therapy, because we need to be able to investigate and find out the root cause and help people uproot, the patterns that they've been used to over time. So talking to a teenager, right, I will be very curious to find out what happened in your past. So most people are trying to deal with the behavior, but there's a root. It stems from somewhere. It stems from a series of experiences.
So you don't think that it could just be that a teenager might just realize that they're now at the stage of puberty and be curious as to what that's about?
Oh, that's a possibility. Yes.
Okay.
When you're a teenager, you're curious.
Okay.
Right? But remember, I said there are three things. So the first is upbringing. Second is environment. So environment, the society,
right,
all the things you're exposed to on social media, online, right? All of that can influence you, which is why you need to be very intentional about what you expose yourself to, especially when you're in a very vulnerable stage of life, right? So because they are vulnerable, they're exposed to a lot, and it's almost like they don't have any filters to make those decisions. So I'm curious to find out, okay, what do you expose your five senses to? Because those things govern kinds of mindsets and the beliefs that you form.
Wow.
So I'm more interested, rather than the what or the behavior, I'm interested in the why. What is responsible? What is the way you feel that makes you think that this is the pathway to take?
Right. Oh my goodness. Okay. That's actually so profound. But one thing that you touched on, talking about mindset. So let's move from that area of children and teenagers. So now we're adults and we have learned to behave a certain way. How does someone break that kind of pattern? And I'm talking about like practical ways, especially if people have been constantly exposed to a certain kind of environment.
That's a beautiful question. I'll say two things. One, and that I may not even have the time to explain, but one is psychotherapy, seeing an expert who can help you find out why you do what you do. A lot of people think that what you do is what's important, but I believe that why you are doing it is more important than what you're doing. Now, when they expose you to the why, they find the root cause, what is responsible for that belief system or that behavioral pattern that you've imbibed. The second thing is, it's a do-it-yourself approach, but I feel it takes a season, a period of time of dedication to this behavior. Now, let me explain this. I'll try to also use scriptures. The Bible says that that He has made my tongue like the pen of a ready writer. Now, I am one of those people who strongly believe that in this new dispensation as Christians, how God writes His laws, right, is not on tablets of stones. He writes and inscribes them on our hearts. So the question is, how does God inscribe His law on your heart? That's a big question. So in this dispensation, that's what He does. He would write His law on the hearts of people. And once it is in your heart, the Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What a lot of people have not gotten the laws into their hearts, and that's why they are behaving a certain way. So they're trying to change the behavior without going backwards to find out how they can infuse God's laws in the heart. And the way God does that, your tongue is the pen of the ready writer, meaning that you have to learn how to say what you want as though it is your present reality. And you have to learn how to say it consistently, because your words create your world. Now, a lot of the things that you believe today, they are as a result of your internal dialogue, the conversation you've had in your head. Now you need to learn how to change that internal dialogue by infusing the right words. The Bible says it's not just what goes in that defiles a man, but it's what comes out. Right. So it means that also what makes you holy is not just what goes in, but what comes out of your mouth. Because when you speak, people think that when you speak, your words are going out. No, every time you speak, your words go in. People don't know, because you speak out, you think the words go out. No, and that's why when you hear yourself on the tape, you don't sound the same way. Because that's probably the first time you're hearing yourself from the outer ear.
It's like, who is that?
Exactly. So normally when you speak, you think it comes this way. No, it goes in. So every time you speak, you're speaking to your inner man. You're speaking to your inner ear. So people have to learn how to, in the midst of the crisis, say the right thing.
Say the right thing.
In the midst of defeat, speak victory. And there's a method to even developing the words and the affirmations, right? Obviously, because I'm a Christian, I strongly believe that it should be premised on God's promises and His words, right? And creating those words and saying them even whilst you're experiencing, that. I remember a pastor of mine, he mentioned how he overcame smoking and how he had become a Christian, and he just thought all that would change, but he still struggled.
Exactly.
And he said he'll go down the road to buy the cigarettes, and as he's smoking, he would still be saying, I am the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. Now, somebody would think that's crazy, but that's speaking victory in the midst of defeat. And people have to learn how to be able to create that. Now, is it automatic? No. It will take time. It will take a routine of consistently, even when you don't feel like it, saying those words to break the mental patterns. Because until the neural patterns are broken, people are stuck, right? So what you're trying to do with those words is to create a new way of behavior, a new pathway for your mind to take when it feels that emotion that normally would cause it to act in the way that it doesn't want.
So talking about the root, right? One question or one sort of debate that's been going back and forth, and I just want us to gain clarity on it, because for one, I think it's good that each person has their own set of opinions and beliefs, and I think the real definition of civilization is that we can have different opinions and find ways to coexist, and not just coexist, but appreciate one another and actually love one another, knowing fully well that we have different opinions, right? That's how to be civil. So I've talked over and over again about where does it come from, this issue of sexuality, people who are same-sex attracted, right? And there's a lot of studies that say, a lot of people who deal with those issues later on in life, root cause being from early on abuse, sexual abuse. However, we know that there's a lot of people who were never sexually abused. So what's the explanation for that? That's number one. Number two, the actual question of, is it natural or is it a choice? Now, I'm of the opinion that it's a choice. However, it's not a choice that's always made for a person. Like you said, there's three factors that inform how we create mindset. So I think that there's a couple different things that could happen to a person that, take the power, the authority to decide certain things out of your hands, and literally they make those decisions for you. So my question is, what is your perspective on those two things?
Yeah, so like you rightly said, some people say it's as a result of hormonal imbalance.
Okay.
Right. I'm also one of those people who believe that it's quality of information that people are exposed to. Right. The world is changing.
Right.
We're talking about the infusion of a lot of millennials and the way they are. It's the information that they're exposed to. So now with the convenience of having a mobile device, connecting to the internet,
it's so much,
right? And all that information affects people, even our bodies, and most people don't even pay attention to that. So if you're consistently exposed to stuff, it's going to affect your mind, and your mind ultimately would affect your body. So it's a function of the quality of the information that people are exposed to. Like I said, with the infusion of millennials, right, in this time, things are changing, and that's also because these people are exposed to devices that can connect to the internet, and they have access to all sorts of information. Now, all that information that's being received by different people would significantly affect their minds and would also affect their bodies, right? Mindsets are formed as a result of the things that our five physical senses are exposed to consistently, right? If you keep seeing something consistently,
Yes.
someday your resistance towards that thing is going to drop, right? I'll give you a typical example.
Okay.
You know, if you watch a lot of series, you probably notice that in a number of series we probably have gay couples and things like that. Now, consistently, and take note, it's a series, so you're watching consistently over an extended period, right? And it's probably always a character that you really love. Now, when you consistently are exposed to that information, you know, you may before then had thought, hey, this is not something that I think is right. You know, that individual may think that way. But if you consistently are exposed to something, there's a likelihood that your resistance towards that thing is going to drop.
It's going to drop.
So that's what's happening in this time.
Which is interesting because that brings to mind even things like Boko Haram and how we see that there's killings all over, and how as a society and a community we've become so desensitized to all of that information. How literally on your Instagram you can just scroll past another because you see it so much now. Makes sense.
So that is the situation that we are experiencing right now, and it's the reality of the time. Keep seeing something, your resistance towards that thing is going to drop, right? Which is really what is happening. People are being exposed to information consistently, and when you watch it in a movie, you know, it bypasses your conscious resistance. So you just discover you begin to like the character, and then you begin to think to yourself, she's really not that bad after all. He's really not that bad after all. Okay, should I also consider going this path? You know, so it's the environment that's playing a significant role, the society we're living in, and I feel like it's going to get a lot more intense. That's the reality. So we on our own have to be able to decide for ourselves, you know, which pathways we want to take. But that's the reality of the environment that we're in. So I see people hating the people who have these behaviors, who you know, believe in same-sex marriage and stuff like that. And I believe that you can hate the behavior but not the individual, because some of these people, the reality is, you know, they were exposed to some kind of information that led to the behavior. Like you rightly said, some people were abused as kids, and it's a pattern that has been formed in their minds that they are replicating now. And until they have an intervention with somebody who understands how to break these cycles, right, they would struggle. So sometimes you want to be able to empathize with such people, to understand where they're coming from, so that you can lead them, you know, out of that pathway to a pathway of peace.
Yeah. In a few minutes we have left, I want to talk about something really quickly. So, because I think the struggle, well, when you talk about the divide in that, you know, Christians who believe that homosexuality isn't right, and then, you know, either homosexuals themselves or people who may not be homosexuals but believe it's fine. You talk about the divide, you know, it's that thing of like you said, you know, you can hate the behavior or dislike the behavior or not agree with the behavior, but love the person and embrace the person, and they can't seem to, you know, there's arguments of, if you can't accept my behavior, then you obviously don't accept me because they're part of me, But what I'm trying to get to is this idea of, or dealing with the issue of homophobia. Because in my opinion, if I believe, and I do believe, that it's not within God's grand design for us to be homosexual, but I think it's as much a sin. Do you understand what I'm saying? As much as that, you know, and the church is, of all people, are probably very guilty of it, and the church has fed society with this, you know, behavior as well. So my question now is, number one, how do we break patterns of homophobia where we can understand that? Because I think there's more to a person than just their sexuality. You know, I shouldn't not want to work with a person because of their sexuality, whether I know the sexuality or not. You know, it shouldn't be a determining factor as to whether I can work peaceably with somebody. You know, whether you're a fantastic engineer or whatever else that is about you that can be appreciated. I think you can always find common ground. So my question is, how can we change that mindset of homophobia from the church, from society?
Education. Because a lot of people do not know where these people are coming from. You know, for me, it's really all about perspective. If I can see what you see, then I can understand. The reason people don't understand is because they're not standing where these people are standing. So you are where you are, you're not trying to see things from my perspective. I remember I had a friend when I was in university who, you know, I discovered at a point in time that, you know, he was attracted to guys. And when, you know, I asked, because I was curious, I asked him questions. I found out that at an early age, at age 6, he was abused by an uncle. And it happened repeatedly. Now, with all that I know now, I really wish I knew all that information, you know, then, because I really couldn't help, you know, but I was able to empathize with his situation because at that age, you have no conscious resistance. You have no choice in the matter. Right?
Exactly,
and
no choice in the
neural
matter.
patterns are already being formed at an unconscious period of your life. You know, you're not aware of what exactly is being done. Now, what is done in an unconscious state tends to go into your long-term memory. Now, if people are educated to understand, right, the plights of some of these people, the fact that these guys are coming from somewhere, the fact that these people have been exposed to information, and maybe it's the environment that they're in, they're consistently, you know, pumped with information about, you know, that sexual preference, right? If people understand these things, they'll be able to empathize better with them, and they'll be able to assist them with dealing with issues. But the problem is we keep saying it's sin, you know, and yes, it is, but can we get into these people's shoes, see things from their world, so that we can then navigate them to where they really desire to be?
Wow, that's actually very interesting. Because I think a lot of people don't understand that, you know, sins, everything is the same really before God, except for the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. It's all the same before God. It's just some are louder in the sense that some are more presented by lifestyle, by way of living than others. There's some things that person can hide, like if you're a chronic, you know, liar.
I just imagine if Jesus were to live in a contemporary times, where would he go?
Exactly.
You know, what kinds of places would he hang out?
Exactly.
Right. Jesus was with tax collectors. Those guys were like touts.
Yes.
They didn't like them at all. But Jesus would go for their parties, go for their events.
Yeah.
Right. He was with Mary Magdalene. You know, people like that. You wonder, how did they become Jesus' friend? So it's being able to see things from the perspectives of people, empathize with them, and then you can provide real solutions.
So empathize with people, and you can provide solutions. And the other thing that we talked about was educating ourselves so that we can understand what's really going on around the why, like you said, the why. Educating ourselves so we can answer the questions of the why. Why do we believe in these things? Why do we agree with them? You know, and get to the root of issues. That's the best way to really attack certain things. There's so much more to talk to you about, Bankole, but time, so much more. Don't worry. Hopefully, somehow we'll pick this up. Hopefully.
We'll get to do this again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
For having me.
This was good. Thank you.